good glowing day, Adam's children. It is I, RadKing, here to preach Adam's word with you this week, and today is kind of a follow-up on a previous message. Before, we went through all the characters in the Fallout series with very evil karma and ranked them from bad to worst, but this time, we're looking at the only NPCs that are labeled as having very good karma. There are 8 such people from Fallout New Vegas and only 3 from Fallout 3. So crank up the rads and see if you agree with my list as we go over the lore, history, and deeds of Fallout's very good karma characters. Starting from the bottom, dead last in 11th place is the now infamous Malcolm Holmes, who is by all accounts a relatively simple man, but is known far and wide amongst fans because of one thing. This guy will hunt you down and relentlessly track you across the whole map if he has to, just to talk about Sunset Sarsaparilla Star bottle caps. Oh crap, here he comes. He's getting closer. I can't outrun him. Make him stop. No! Oh, well, that was easy. When Malcolm finally ambushes and talks to you, which he will, oh yes he will, he claims that he used to be an avid collector of star bottle caps, but has since given up the pursuit, mainly because it has become too dangerous. There is an old legend that if one collects a bunch of these star caps, they can claim an old pre-war treasure at the Sunset Sarsaparilla headquarters. No one really knows what it is, but it's gotta be something good, right? Malcolm's main interest, according to him, is to give us some important information related to the star bottle caps because he is just a modern-day Samaritan. He observed us picking up a star bottle cap at some point, and after a bit of time of following us, he felt safe enough to approach and tell us the significance of our find, since we seemed pretty oblivious. Apparently, there is a man completely obsessed with getting the Sunset Sarsaparilla treasure to the point where he will hunt down and kill anyone he suspects has recovered a star cap, known as Alan Mack. Malcolm is apparently doing us a favor by letting us know what we're getting into by collecting the caps, that we might get some psycho treasure seeker hunting us down, so that is a kind thing, I guess. The problem is, we don't really know much else about Malcolm because we have very limited background information, but it is worth noting that Malcolm comes off like a very honest guy. At first, he tries to introduce himself as a trader wanting to trade, but before he says too much, he just comes clean, telling us who he really is because he admits that he is an awful liar. That actually is a lie, because while he says that he gave up the pursuit of star caps a while ago, looking in his inventory when pickpocketing him, or after killing him, he has a handful of star bottle caps himself. So Malcolm, what's your angle here, man? With the scarce information we have about him, and some of the things he says we know to be lies, he does not rank highly at all on this list. He's a nice enough guy, and he is as persistent as can be. He will literally run across the entire map in pursuit of the player, only stopping when we enter interior spaces, and he has a habit of popping up at the damnedest of times. But is that enough for the very good karma? For these reasons, Malcolm Holmes is at the bottom of this list. Number 11 out of the only 11 NPCs in the entire series that has very good karma. Second from the bottom is Tomas. He is a roving prospector that travels around the outskirts of New Vegas looking for pre-war scrap and other treasures that he can salvage and sell. Recently, he has developed a new obsession, finding and collecting Sunset Sarsaparilla Star bottle caps. Here we go again. And he keeps his collection hanging on a string around his neck. Or at least he says he does, because we can't even see the frickin' thing. On the road between Nipton and the Nipton Road stop, Tomas was traveling with a woman named Jacqueline, and about the time the player approaches them, they engage in a gunfight, and one of them, usually Jacqueline, dies. But the player can intervene and help whoever they choose. Should Tomas survive, he will approach the player out of breath and bewildered, saying that Jacqueline attacked him out of nowhere after they got a bit flirty, having traveled with each other for a few days. According to him, she demanded that he hand over his caps, and when he threw his purse of caps to her, she just laughed at him. He realized that she actually wanted his star bottle caps that he was wearing around his neck, but he was completely unwilling to part with his so-called lucky necklace. Tomas is unaware of the significance of the star bottle caps. He just thinks they are cool, and so he began collecting them, although he can be convinced or coerced into giving them to the player. If he is told how dangerous they are because they are sought after by a lot of people willing to do very bad things, he may give them to the player rather than risk being shot and robbed again. Tomas is rather pleasant during his short exchange with the player, even if he is a bit naive, picking up random stragglers to travel with, not knowing what the star bottle caps are, or even being tricked or intimidated by the player to give them up. At any rate, we cannot say much about Tomas other than he seems nice and well-intentioned, although again quite a bit naive, and it is worth considering why, out of the 8 very good karma NPCs in New Vegas, 2 of them are associated with star bottle caps. Are they trying to say something here? Tomas is nice, but is he nice enough to be the best of the best? Second from the bottom for you, Tomas. It's nothing personal. The hospitable manager of the Vault 21 Hotel, Sarah Weintraub, comes in at number 9 on this list, but not because she necessarily did anything wrong. She absolutely loves the Vault 21 Hotel, since she used to be an inhabitant of the vault before it had been partially filled with concrete by Mr. House and turned into a hotel. It was actually because of Sarah and her brother that Mr. House decided not to fill the entire vault with concrete, just the lower levels. But Sarah is still pretty angry at Mr. House for that decision. Sarah is very attached to her vault, and the fact that she has a fear of wide open spaces means that she stays here permanently. She literally never leaves, and she doesn't really like to admit that in front of most people. Because Sarah provides a hospitality service to many kinds of people, she is very personable and nice to all those she meets, although should the player get on her bad side, she will refuse to let us rent a room. Sarah isn't alone. Well, she kind of is, but she has a brother who goes by the name Michael, who has a similar fear of open spaces, but works at a warehouse just next door where he designs neon lights. They are quite close, regularly exchanging messages on their terminals, and should Michael be killed, Sarah will become despondent and borderline inconsolable since he is all the family she had left. In addition to renting out rooms, she will sell vault merchandise, the most popular of which are vault suits. She has trouble keeping them in stock, and as such will recruit the player to find other vault suits or even other leather suits that she can then use to create more Vault 21 merchandise. Sarah has a very sweet and energetic personality and is easily one of the more approachable characters in New Vegas, and her excitement at giving tours and trying to convince patrons to buy her shop's merch shows how passionate she is about living and working in Vault 21. All of that said, we don't see anything here that really warrants her very good karma. Yeah, she's nice. Yes, she cares about her brother. Yes, she thinks Mr. House is a bonehead, but that is about all we know about her, and so she is relegated near the bottom of the list of very good karma characters. Number 8 has us in Freeside, where we meet an old lifelong resident who was born and raised here, and despite it all, was able to rise above it. Old Ben is an older gentleman by the time we meet him, and he is often first encountered as we approach the gates to the strip for the very first time. Ben has been through a lot, which is not unusual for those that have lived their lives in Freeside, but through it all, he has not let any of the tragedies or betrayals that he has experienced jade him. Ben grew up the son of a butcher in Freeside, but his father's business was forced to close when a competitor set up a shop nearby and was able to undercut his father's prices considerably. Shortly after closing the shop, his father passed away, seemingly from despair, leaving Ben in a broken home. Young Ben harbored suspicions that the new butcher was selling questionable meat, and he was eventually proven right when people in the town started to come down with the shakes, which was a symptom of consuming human flesh. It would later be discovered that the competitor had been using human flesh, as a number of human corpses were found hidden in his old shop. When he got older, he was able to secure employment as a courier, which he would do for some time, but he would eventually leave the profession because of how dangerous it was. Our own experience of being abducted and being shot in the head is a testament to Ben's claim, but that job helped him earn enough money to buy himself a passport that allowed him onto the New Vegas Strip, which at the time was substantially cheaper than it is now. Ben worked as a crier for the Tops Casino, standing outside and using his nice voice and personable attitude. He was successful both at his job and at charming the female employees at the Tops Casino. One day he flirted a little bit too much with the wrong woman, and a manager at the Tops grew jealous and accused old Ben of stealing from the casino vault. How a crier could get in there, I have no idea. But when it was discovered that a theft had indeed occurred, Ben didn't really have any way to defend himself from the accusations, so he was kicked out of the strip, losing his job, his apartment, and everything else he owned. Starting from scratch, and now with a tarnished reputation, he didn't give up or join the unsavory elements of Freeside to get back on his feet. Instead, he used his natural talents to secure a job as an escort, where he would be paid by clients for intimacy. Although the job seemingly paid well, Ben, to put it in his own terms, felt like a piece of meat and wished to find more fulfilling employment. He was able to purchase the necessary equipment to become a bodyguard, which he was once again quite successful at, and he was able to earn enough to retire, earning a good reputation once again after he helped save some tourists from a violent mugging. Old Ben has since been taking it easy, sitting just outside of the gate to the strip, trying to be a helpful aid to those that approach, informing them that everyone, including us, need to talk to the Securitron gate guard before trying to enter the strip, otherwise they will open fire. I think it is telling that when Ben is retired and could be doing really anything he wants, he decides to spend his time here in order to help people out so they don't get accidentally murderized by New Vegas security. He is well known in the Freeside community and has a good overall reputation, as evidenced by the player gaining infamy if we decide to kill him. He can also be convinced by the player to work as a so-called smooth talker, helping folks get their jollies off at the Atomic Wrangler. And for a guy that stopped that line of work for feeling unfulfilled, he sure books it over there pretty quick. Old Ben seems like a good guy that led an eventful life and is well liked in his community, but we don't really know much about the good things he has done or the types of things he believes in, and therefore he doesn't rank very high here. At number 7, we have a crusty but intelligent old ghoul named Keely. Keely is a first-generation ghoul, and her curious nature has led her to become a lifelong scientist and researcher. Her very long life has allowed her to investigate many different fields of research, and as of 2281, she has decided to do some contract work with the Office of Industry and Science of the NCR. Her expertise makes her a very useful member of the team, although she and others on the team all dislike their boss immensely, and for good reason. Thomas Hildern is the director of the OSI, although he routinely takes credit for everyone else's work and is only interested in projects that have a chance to advance his career and elevate his place within the NCR. While everyone on his team dislikes him, especially seeing as he doesn't do any of his own research, Keely especially despises him because she has a very pure definition and idea of what science and scientific research is and what it's meant for. Due to this, Keely doesn't waste any opportunity to make Thomas look like a fool, especially around other people. Perhaps this is why Thomas eventually asked Keely to venture to Vault 22, a vault that he believes has data regarding agricultural research. But the thing is, none of the previous mercenaries that he has sent to Vault 22 has ever come back. Thomas believes that the research done at Vault 22 has the potential to allow the NCR to genetically modify crops to grow better in the Mojave, which would help alleviate some of the supply issues that they've been having lately. When the player finally meets Thomas and is acquainted with him and Angela, the other team member, he doesn't waste any time asking us to go and get the data from Vault 22. This quest is how we first meet Keely, because she is in fact still alive, but a lot has happened since she entered the vault and she is in a bad situation. Upon entering the vault, she was able to uncover what exactly happened here, why plants grow so easily, and why there are enemies unique to this area only, namely spore plants and spore carriers. The research being done in Vault 22 experimented with a genetically modified fungus that was developed at Big Mountain that was made to infect and kill pests. This particular fungus, though, would slowly take over the organism's body and hijack the brain, controlling the organism and thereby making it easier to further spread spores to other living creatures. This, in the end, was the undoing of Vault 22. The spores infected the staff and turned them into lichen-covered monsters that only tried to attack other people to further spread the fungus. When Keely connected all the dots, she knew that this specific research had to be destroyed, along with the plants and spores within the vault, because they posed a grave threat to the inhabitants of the Mojave. She was somehow knocked unconscious by a group of giant mantises, seen here being flashy little guys, who intended then to take her to the spore plants, where they would eat her. She got lucky though, because apparently they don't like 200-year-old dried out ghoul meat. After being found by the player, who clears out most of the enemies, she concocts a plan. With the help of the player, she intends to release flammable gas on the 5th floor where most of the spore plants are, and the player is to ignite the gas somehow, burning up all the spores, and if we aren't careful, us too. Doh. Once the player helps neutralize this Mojave-sized danger, the last thing Keely wants to do is delete all data related to the killer fungus. She fears that someone may accidentally or purposefully recreate this research, and the horror of the spores and spore carriers would once again threaten the Mojave. Therefore, she believes that the research should be destroyed, and that's pretty understandable. However, she can be convinced otherwise if the player tells her that science is about the successes as much as the failures, and that this could help scientists not make the same mistake in the future. Putting it in those terms will make her relent, after which Keely and the player can finally leave Vault 22 and its vegetative horrors behind them. Keely has a strong sense of right and wrong, and that combined with her love for scientific inquiry is what makes her act and think the way she does. That is why she can simultaneously be so mean to people like Thomas and even turn hostile towards us if we refuse to delete the data without explaining why, but her heart's in the right place. She saves all the good research at Vault 22, but understands the danger involved with the spore research and is willing to destroy it for the betterment of society. She is also quite proud, curt, and can be rather unpleasant to be around, like when she admits that it was painful for her to say that she needed our help. For this reason, I'm putting her at number 7, although it could be argued that she should be higher on the list, but this is my list. Don't tell me how to do my list. The number 6 slot, which is almost halfway, remember there are 11 people on this list, is Goodsprings' very own Sunny Smiles. Sunny has multiple roles in the small town, but they all have one thing in common. She shoots stuff. Her primary job is to keep the dangerous wildlife away from Goodsprings, usually geckos, coyotes, and radscorpions, who are attracted to the water near the town. Sunny benefits from this by skinning the geckos, tanning and selling their hides to the traders. Being good with her rifle, she is also the primary town watchman and is well aware of the Powder Gangers, a violent gang who have been eyeing the town of Goodsprings for some time now. Sunny is a very helpful person. She's willing to take the time to help and train the player character after they have left Doc Mitchell's house, walking us through the finer points of using weapons, providing us with a rifle and ammo, teaching us to aim effectively, and will even take us just east of Goodsprings to go hunt some geckos. While hunting down the geckos, the player will come across a settler who is being attacked by the little scaly devils, and Sunny will quickly jump into action to try and save them. She also has some survivalist skills and is willing to impart her knowledge to the player, showing us how to make healing powder using Brock flower and Xander root at a campsite. Most crucially, however, when the Powder Gangers come into town to try and get a Crimson Caravan trader who has taken refuge at Goodsprings, Sunny Smiles is the first person to enthusiastically sign up with the player and fight against the Powder Gangers. When asked why she was so quick to say yes to such a dangerous request, she replies that she thinks a confrontation with them is inevitable, and so would rather get it over sooner with rather than later. Her greatest strengths are in her willingness to help, even though neither she nor the town of Goodsprings really has all that much to give, as well as her fearlessness when confronting the wildlife or the approaching Powder Gangers. She doesn't seem too concerned about having a lot of stuff, since she will tell the player about a safe that they can go pick in the abandoned schoolhouse that is infested with mantises, even giving us bobby pins and a locksmith reader magazine to make it easier for us to loot whatever is in the safe. She doesn't concern herself with much outside of Goodsprings, not knowing much about the Legion other than that they are pretty awful people, and the NCR, who she acknowledges has made the roads a bit safer, but she's still not a fan of them. She cares most about Goodsprings and the people of the town, and even for us, a courier who has just been shot in the head and miraculously survived the ordeal with the help of Doc Mitchell. She seems to care most, though, about her dog named Cheyenne, whom she has a close relationship with, and should Cheyenne die while hunting the geckos, she will be grief-stricken and embarrassed to show so much emotion in front of us. but something like that is totally understandable. Sunny is a nice person, willing to help those in her small community, even when confronted by a group of well-armed thugs, and all of this amounts to her being ranked almost smack dab in the middle of this list. Number 5 is the first character we see from Fallout 3, and it is Amada Almodovar, the daughter of the overseer of Vault 101. Amada is shown to be friends with the player during the tutorial. She also lost her mother at a very young age, and this shared experience may have brought the two together. We get a glimpse into this friendship when she first throws the player a surprise 10th birthday party, giving us a Grognak the Barbarian magazine. Fast forward 6 years and we get the chance to help Amada stave off the gross advances of Butch and the other tunnel snakes. All of that pales in comparison though to the day our father left Vault 101, and she risked her own safety to warn us that our life was in danger. Her father, the Vault 101 overseer, had a strict isolationist policy that the vault was meant to never interact with the outside world or its inhabitants. And James's escape caused a swift and violent reaction from him and most of the security guards. Amada was worried about our safety since vault security had killed Jonas, a friend of our father James, who was apparently helping him escape, and Amada thought that we may be hurt or killed if vault security got their hands on us. She even went as far as stealing her dad's 10mm pistol to give it to us, asking us not to use it unless truly necessary, but nonetheless arming us with her father's weapons so we could defend ourselves. Although she loves her father, through the years their relationship grew strained because she disagreed with his isolationist stance more and more, and when she saw what he and the vault security were capable of doing during James's escape, she could hardly bear it. That is why she chose to help the player both in warning us as well as providing us with her father's gun. Both things which will land her in massive trouble with an already irate father who was incredibly unpredictable at the moment. This is clearly seen as the player tries to make their way out of the vault, passing by the security office where the overseer, Amada, and the Chief of Security Officer Mac are having an interrogation where they begin to hurt Amada in an attempt to have her divulge information as to our whereabouts. And to Amada's credit, she never gives it up. Amada has strong principles, one of those being that she seeks to not be reliant on her father and his position of power, even when she is harassed by the tunnel snakes. Butch and his gang will try and body shame her by calling her fat, accuse her of being a daddy's girl, as well as give unsolicited sexual remarks in an attempt to denigrate her, but she never resorts to using her father's position or power to get back at them. Even with how strained her relationship with her father is, after everything that happened with James and the Lone Wanderer's escape, Amada wished to make things better with her father and patch up their relationship, but this wouldn't last long. The escape of James, the Lone Wanderer, and the death of multiple vault inhabitants at the hands of security and the strong-armed lockdown of the vault caused more people to question whether the isolationist stance was correct, with many, Amada included, eventually concluding that to continue to disengage with the outside world would eventually lead to the vault population dwindling and eventually dying. When these concerns were aired, mostly by Amada herself, the Overseer cracked down hard yet again, trying to crush any and all dissent. Amada, possibly due to the influence of her father, proved to be a motivational leader, and she became the figurehead for those that were rebelling against her father. I think this shows strength of character since she was simultaneously able to still love her father, yet stand up for her own convictions, even to the point of violent coercion. Amada was able to broadcast a radio message that requests the player to return to Vault 101 in order to help break the stalemate between the two groups. Depending on the player's actions, things can play out a number of ways. While Amada and many others want the vault to be open for various personal reasons, it is up to the player to decide whether the vault is destroyed, stays closed, or opens up to the rest of the world. Should Amada's father die, she will take his place as overseer, being chosen by the citizens of the vault due to her natural leadership skills and ability to empathize with them. She can be convinced to stand down and accept the fact that opening up to the world is a bad idea if she is presented with information about the Enclave trying to find and breach the vault, so she is a reasonable person as well. Regardless of whether the vault opens to the world or not, Amada will always ask the player to leave, even if we still have a good relationship with her, because she feels like she is doing what is best for the vault and its inhabitants. Her decision to put the well-being of those she leads over her own interests, namely an old friendship, I think is honorable. Should the player decide to destroy the vault, forcing the inhabitants to abandon the vault and go out into the wasteland, Amada will tell the player to leave, and if she ever sees us again, she will kill us. Afterwards, she can be seen encountered speaking with a group of Enclave soldiers and an officer out in the wasteland. The officer will ask her where she got her vault suit, after which she will tell the officer that she is from Vault 101 and that they need help. The officer will reassure her that the Enclave is there to assist all American citizens in distress and asks her where the vault is. She shows them the vault's location on her Pip-Boy, and when the officer is satisfied with the information, orders the soldiers to fire and kill her. She will either die there due to her vault-induced naivete, or, if she is saved by the player, she yells at us and walks away, and can eventually aggro if we don't leave her alone. Amada's on the better half of this list because she has a good moral compass that she sticks to. She puts the well-being of those she cares about above herself. She loves her father, even though he is kind of a psycho, and she inspires those around her, landing her at number 5 out of 11. Number 4 is Bert Gunnarsson, who is a doctor of the physical body and of the spirit, being from the far-off land of Utah, much of which is now known as New Canaan. Essentially, his entire background comes from lines that are not accessible in-game, and it appears that it's a bug that prevents the dialogue from being spoken, rather than a specific choice to cut the dialogue from the game. As such, we will go over the dialogue, but since it can't be encountered in the game, it will have an effect on his ranking. I will also make sure to note when I am referencing information from these cut lines, so there is no confusion. Being from New Canaan, it is no surprise that he is a Mormon holding the office of elder who came down into New Vegas only recently. According to cut dialogue, he seems to have become a doctor not too long ago, saying that he owes his medical knowledge to the followers of the apocalypse, who he spent some time with since he has been in New Vegas. However, his relationship with them apparently soured as of late, because Bert insists on working with and helping refugees at the Aerotech Office Parking Refugee Camp, which is managed by the NCR, who, it should be noted, the followers have a strained relationship with. However, Bert tells us that he goes where he feels like he should be, in order to do the most good for the most people. Bert is by all accounts a good person, and appears to be extremely selfless, because while he does his best to use his meager resources to improve the health of those at the refugee camp, he also provides spiritual help and guidance as well. He describes the refugees he helps as those that were trying to get into New Vegas, but couldn't afford the steep entrance price, and ended up in this camp, looking for work to either save up to get onto the strip, or pass the time with gambling and liquor. Many of these refugees are very different from him, and don't see the world as he sees it, but he nonetheless strives to help those that he can. He is one of the very few doctors that will heal the player for free, although he cannot heal rads or addiction, so his abilities are limited. Perhaps the most telling of all when it comes to Bert's character is why he traveled all the way down to New Vegas. According to cut dialogue, he has followed the trail of a wayward friend of his, one that according to Bert fell in with a bad crowd that consisted of chem dealers and raiders. This friend, who he calls Nephi, headed west towards New Vegas, and Bert followed them this entire distance in the far-off hope that he could turn his old friend away from the chems and violence and back to the church. The cut dialogue continues, where he informs us that his friend is none other than one of the fiend leaders named Driver Nephi, who is notorious and feared for his extremely violent disposition, where he earned his nickname for preferring to use a golf driver to cave in the skulls of NCR soldiers. In addition to fighting the NCR and doing copious amounts of chems, he also deals in the slave trade, and even though he is by all metrics completely irredeemable, it didn't stop Bert from trying to help his friend. Unfortunately, Bert could never get through to Nephi. The only line referencing Nephi that exists in the game is after he hears of Driver Nephi's death, where he solemnly states that he hopes that Nephi's soul can find rest. Bert seems to be an extremely selfless person, and even though no one would fault him for going back home after failing to help his friend, he chooses to stay and try to help people the best he can, if the cut dialogue is to be believed. Perhaps the most cynical of people will attribute his friendliness to his desire to preach his beliefs or hawk his religion. But those at the camp don't seem to think so, and his services are appreciated, especially by Captain Parker, who is in charge of the camp. Bert would easily top this list if all of his dialogue remained in the game, but as it stands, Bert is going to come in at 4th from the top. Coming in at number 3 is Star Paladin Sarah Lyons on the East Coast, a fierce East Coast Brotherhood leader and warrior who is the daughter of Elder Owen Lyons, the group's leader. She is an only child and was raised solely by her father after her mother died while Sarah was very young. What's with everyone's moms dying in Fallout 3? Sarah came with Owen on the epic mission across the United States and is a firm believer in the Brotherhood ethos and is extremely loyal to her father. Growing up, she excelled in combat under the tutelage of Paladin Tristan and showed the same amount of valor in combat as her father did when he was a young knight. As a result, she was deservedly promoted up the ranks until she became Star Paladin Lyons and the leader of a specialized strike force known as Lion's Pride. Lion's Pride consists of a hand-picked group of Brotherhood soldiers who under her leadership are used in special operations like the defense of the GNR Plaza when it came under super mutant attack, which is usually the first time that the player meets Sarah and her team. Perhaps because she is so young, she is brazen and quick to action, a trait that is often tempered by her father. When the Enclave suddenly appeared and took Project Purity, killing many of the scientists, Sarah was wanting to immediately strike back and retake the facility from the Enclave. Elder Lyons disagreed, believing that with manpower and supplies at critical levels, they should not rush into a technologically superior foe, since the facility was useless to the Enclave so long as they didn't have a Garden of Eden creation kit or GECK. Sarah would finally get her wish though after the player accidentally led the Enclave straight to the GECK, meaning all they needed was the activation code. By this time though, the Brotherhood had a tactical advantage. They had managed to get Liberty Prime online, and with Prime's overwhelming power, supported tactically by the Lion's Pride, they were able to retake Project Purity, kill or run off Colonel Autumn, and scatter the local Enclave forces. Sarah is one of the few NPCs that the player can ask to go in and activate the water purifier at the end of Fallout 3's story, and in a good show of character, she will do it, even though she is the only NPC that is not immune to radiation, and there's a real chance that she will die in the attempt. Her willingness to do as instructed by her superiors, usually her father, Elder Lyons, as well as determination to do what needs to be done for the good of the Brotherhood and those around her, proves that she isn't brave in order to impress or show off, but she's brave in a more honorable and selfless way. Sarah makes it a point to find and recover the player at the end of the Broken Steel DLC when the Enclave's mobile base crawler is targeted for an orbital strike. She herself having just awoken from a coma due to the radiation blast she received at Project Purity. She just cannot be kept down when there is a job to be done and the people she cares about are at risk. Although she had the makings of a leader, we don't know what kind of elder she would have made and how her bravery and selflessness in the face of danger would have impacted the Brotherhood. Not long after her father passed away, she herself was killed in a firefight with super mutants, since she and the Brotherhood were still carrying on the mission of cleansing the capital wasteland of the psychotic green rage beasts. Although her promotion to Star Paladin and the unique position to lead her own hand-picked strike team would seem to be due to nepotism, since her father was the elder, no one actually thinks that, because she has truly proven herself to the Brotherhood, and her accolades are well-deserved. She doesn't let that get to her head either. She remains respectful, disciplined, and humble enough to not come off as the privileged daughter of the elder, although she is also often blunt and to the point. As an example, her father sees the outcasts as the natural outcome of his decision to shift focus from finding technology towards helping the Capital Wasteland fight super mutants, and he ultimately respects their decision to leave. Sarah, on the other hand, is more brash and appears to condone a more firm and aggressive approach to dealing with the outcasts. This, I think, reflects her quick judgment that in the heat of battle is probably a great skill to have, but when dealing with delicate diplomatic matters would only make things worse, and something that her father seems to understand. Nonetheless, all these positive traits heavily outweigh the negatives, and therefore Sarah comes in at number 3 on the very good Karma NPC list. Second from the top is Fallout New Vegas' very own Julie Farkas, the local leader of the Followers of the Apocalypse in the New Vegas area. The Followers is an organization that goes as far back as the first Fallout, that is dedicated towards helping mankind recover from the Great War through knowledge and compassion. Julie herself is incredibly busy running the local organization, getting resources it needs, conducting important research, giving out food and medicine to the needy, engaging in public projects like constructing water pumps, and trying to mediate disputes and broker peace in the turbulent area of Freeside. We actually don't know too much about Julie's background and past dealings, and she doesn't talk about herself all that much, but we can get a sense for the kind of person she is based on the things that she is doing and the quests that she will send us on. In order to fulfill their mission to help and educate the inhabitants of Freeside, they need a steady supply of medicine, and they are unable to meet the demands themselves and therefore ask for donations. In return for donating medical supplies, the player can get discounts on medical services, can get a free stim pack, Radaway, or Fixer every so often, and eventually, after helping with some quests, can become a member of the Followers. Although Julie has issues with the NCR because of their inability to govern adequately, Julie can be convinced to help the NCR at the Battle of Hoover Dam, because she is not blind to the fact that the Legion is by far the greatest threat to New Vegas. Kaisar and his Legion would not give one Roman shit about the Followers and their purpose, and therefore, according to Julie, should be stopped. Julie shows us that she is both principled and pragmatic, and nowhere is that more obvious than when she asks the player to help secure a chemical supplier that will allow the Followers to increase their medicine stores. The only source that can realistically create enough alcohol for the Followers are the Garrett siblings, James and Francine. They run the local Den of Iniquity, which is what Julie likes to call the popular Freeside bar, the Atomic Wrangler. She has an overall low opinion of the Garretts, since they profit immensely off of keeping people high or drunk, but she also knows that her options are limited, and therefore will accept the arrangement if it means they finally can get a steady supply of chemicals in order to provide adequate medical services. Julie's dedication to the Followers of the Apocalypse, given their precarious and overwhelming situation in Freeside, is commendable, and shows that her heart is in the right place. And at the same time, she is willing to accept compromises and even work with people that she personally dislikes, setting aside her own biases in order to do the most good. And that is an admirable trait. She is not a violent person, regardless of the player's stance among the Followers, as she is never violently hostile, but if the player wrongs her and the Followers, she will make her distaste known in dialogue. Her convictions, her pragmatism, self-sacrifice, and ultimate devotion to one of the most thankless jobs in the entire Mojave has me ranking her very high on this list at number 2. I only wish we knew a little bit more about her. And here we are at number 1, and who could it be other than the honorific Elder Owen Lyons himself? Elder Lyons is a pretty complex individual and has gone through an evolution from the time that he first set out on the mission that would bring him to the Capital Wasteland. Some of the things that he has done have been pretty morally dubious, but karma in the Fallout games seems to be a current reflection of one's goodness rather than the sum of all good and bad someone has ever done. Going back as far as we can, we know Lyons was a firm believer in the Brotherhood of Steel's cause, and this loyal service and strength made him the top candidate for the Brotherhood of Steel leadership at their headquarters known as Lost Hills. The mission had multiple objectives, but would have a large group of paladins, scribes, knights, and initiates make their way across the United States, first trying to make contact with a Brotherhood group that they knew were in and around Chicago in the Midwest. They were to continue their march eastward and make their way to the nation's capital, where they were to execute the primary mission of the Brotherhood of Steel, which is the search, seizure, and protection of technology and related knowledge and information. Somehow the West Coast Brotherhood had heard reports or rumors of a large super mutant population that could be found at the nation's capital as well, and investigating this was a secondary objective. Lyons and his group set out. They apparently failed to establish contact with the Midwestern Brotherhood of Steel for whatever reason, and continued eastward. Lyons' group would eventually make it to the Capital Wasteland, find the old Pentagon building, claim it as their own, and start work to fortify it. One of the things we know Lyons did after arriving at the Capital Wasteland was executing a special operation up north in the destroyed city of Pittsburgh, known as the Pit. The Pit was by all metrics an absolute hellhole. A combination of radiation and carcinogenic materials in the air and water caused death, mutations, and a unique psychological and physiological disease that came to be known as troglodyte degeneration contagion. To say the Pit sucked is kind of an understatement. Its desperation and brutality was legendary in the surrounding areas and is likely how the Brotherhood became aware of it. For reasons that are never completely explained, Lyons decided that he and his special strike team would travel to the Pit and slowly work west to east with the purpose of killing anything that was mutated, anyone that looked dangerous, or anyone who tried to stop them, and to take whatever tech they could while they did it. This event became known as the Scourge and resulted in the deaths of over half the city, people both mutated and not, as well as the abduction, or rescue, depending on your perspective, of young, unmutated children to take back with them to bring up within the Brotherhood. Amongst the technology they gathered, there is reference of a specific item recovered that is never identified, with Lyons being one of the few that knows what it was. One Brotherhood member would be crushed under a collapsed building and left for dead. But this man, known as Initiate Ishmael, would survive and go on to become a brutal raider leader in years to come. The Scourge is notable when speaking of Elder Lyons because it gives us a glimpse into who he once was. The exact purpose of the Scourge had no clear objective, and that combined with the amount of death and destruction is considered by many Brotherhood members as breaking with normal Brotherhood combat operations. The Scourge was also used by the more hardline members of the group as proof that Lyons used to be hard and uncompromising, but that has changed over time. Lyons, whose rank at the time was Star Paladin, had successfully made it to the Capital Wasteland, established a base in the ruins of the Pentagon, and discovered a new superweapon, Liberty Prime. These successes earned him great respect amongst those under his command, as well as the leadership out west, even though that would start to change. He was therefore directed to establish a permanent Brotherhood presence, and as such was promoted to Elder of the East Coast Brotherhood, giving him ultimate power. And he started to make fundamental changes to their mission. Elder Lyons' right-hand man and longtime friend, Scribe Rothschild, will tell us, rather regretfully, that Lyons' attitude and focus started to shift after seeing how destructive the super mutant hordes had been to the Capital Wasteland and its denizens. Although Lyons didn't completely abandon the mission to recover pre-war technology, the amount of resources and the manpower that was dedicated towards fighting super mutants and finding their source meant that they were unable to make much progress on what used to be their primary mission. Lyons was insistent on his path, which eventually led to the West Coast leadership cutting off communication. This meant there was no possibility of aid or reinforcements, meaning that they were truly on their own. To make matters worse, there was dissension among the ranks of the East Coast Brotherhood, hardliners who were upset that Lyons had completely shifted their focus away from their primary objective to recover technology. For some reason, this only amounted to internal resentment and discontent about how little progress had been made with both fighting the super mutants and with recovering technology, a sentiment that is expressed openly by Scribe Rothschild. For some, they took it one step further and decided that their only choice was to break away from Lyons' chapter of the Brotherhood and relocate somewhere else, where they could actually fulfill their technologically focused directives. This group would embrace the name Outcasts, to spite Lyons and his East Coast Brotherhood, and marked their power armor with a distinct red and black pattern to differentiate themselves. The blow that was dealt when the Outcasts left was impossible to ignore, since not only did they lose capable warriors, but a lot of resources and weapons that the Outcasts grabbed on their way out. Still, Lyons would persist, even aiding Wastelander-led initiatives to improve life in the Capital Wasteland, like Project Purity. James, the father of the player, struck a deal between him, Elder Lyons, and the other scientists, where the Brotherhood would guard Project Purity from the super mutant menace while they got to work trying to create a sustainable process that produced clean drinking water. The East Coast Brotherhood was brought to its lowest point around the start of Fallout 3 in 2277, where they barely had the manpower and strength to hold on to the various bases and outposts that they had, being no closer to finding the super mutant source and eliminating the threat. The Enclave would suddenly burst out onto the scene in dramatic fashion, directly in opposition to the Brotherhood at their moment of weakness. The line is thin between bravery and stupidity, and perhaps Elder Lion's insistence on doing what he felt was the right thing, even in the face of what seemed like an endless super mutant horde, being cut off from the potential support on the West Coast, dealing with internal mutiny, and facing a new technologically superior threat in the Enclave could be considered stupid. However, I think it demonstrates Elder Lion's strength of character. In the 20 or so years he and his group had been in the Capital Wasteland, he had gone from the paladin that led the kill squad that gutted the pit of half of its inhabitants and stole away a generation of children, to putting the very existence of the Brotherhood on the line in order to protect the vulnerable communities of the Capital Wasteland who have been suffering under the onslaught of super mutant raids for years. This he does in the face of immense self-doubt, and that is reflected in at least one of his personal recordings where he wonders if his leadership should be handed off to the next generation. While some Brotherhood members may see him as selfish for sacrificing the Brotherhood's lives and resources, or as insubordinate for acting against the orders of the West Coast, or soft for feeling sympathy for the Wastelanders, at the end of the day, Lyons is making a personal and group sacrifice in order to help those outside of the Brotherhood. Making such a decision in the face of such hardship and staying true to these principles, in my opinion, justifies the very good karma rating that he is given when we encounter him in 2287. And given the stakes, everything that is on the line in terms of the Brotherhood survival, but also the Capital Wasteland survival, I think he deserves the top spot for doing the right thing when it was hardest. That is it, Rad Fellows. I would love to hear your thoughts on the very good karma characters in Fallout. Do you agree with my ranking? Is there anything I missed that should have been mentioned? I think it is very interesting that in Fallout New Vegas, there were only 5 NPCs that were very evil, but 8 that are very good. In contrast, Fallout 3 only had 3 very good NPCs and 9 very evil. What do you think that says about these two games? Thank you for watching, and thank you to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members who support me, making it possible for me to crank these videos out. And if you would like to support me, you can do so however you want. I would like to give a warm welcome to ToenChen96 as well, our newest supporter. A special thank you to my top tier, All for Adam patrons, Acrid B, Arctic Snowpup, Gardner Minshew Simp, and Tessa Storm. Adam will surely bless you. Please be kind to yourselves and those around you. Bask in Adam's radiance, and I will see you soon.